Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today we're tackling, well, a real phenomenon, a book that really turned conventional wisdom about work and life completely upside down, The 4-Hour Workweek. Famously rejected by, 26 out of 27 publishers?
That's right. Astonishing, really.
Yet it became this massive bestseller impacting millions. And look, this isn't just a book, it's more like a manifesto, maybe a blueprint for a radically different way of living. Our mission today is to unpack the most important nuggets of knowledge and maybe some surprising insights from this source material. We'll explore its core philosophy, its practical strategies, all about redefining success, freedom, happiness, but not, in some distant retirement.
Right.
Right here, right now, we'll be diving into the book's 4-step deal framework: define, eliminate, automate, and liberate.
What's truly, I think, revolutionary here is how this book just challenged the very definition of wealth and purpose. It introduces us to this concept of the new rich, or NR, as the author calls it.
Right.
These are people who basically abandon the deferred life plan. That classic idea of working for decades, saving up for one single retirement way down the line. Instead, they create these, well, luxury lifestyles, but in the present,
How do they do that?
by strategically leveraging two key currencies: time and mobility. That's the core.
Okay. So, what does all this mean for you listening? We're going to dive into how this book suggests you can escape the traditional 9 to 5 grind, how you might automate income streams, and really design a life that's rich in experiences, not just, bank balances. Get ready to question, well, maybe everything you thought you knew about work and wealth and living. Okay, let's maybe unpack this opening idea from the book. Everything popular is wrong. That's a bold statement.
Is it bold?
But the author backs it up with some really vivid examples showing how challenging the established rules can lead to, well, unexpected and sometimes extraordinary success.
Exactly. A really powerful illustration is the author's own story about winning a Chinese kickboxing national championship.
Right, I remember reading that.
Yeah, and he's clear he wasn't the most naturally talented fighter there. Not at all.
Yeah.
He won because he read the rule book differently. He actually talks about losing 28 pounds in, 18 hours just for weigh-ins,
Wow.
and then exploiting a technicality in the rules to basically just push opponents off the platform.
Yeah.
It wasn't about fighting harder. It was about fighting smarter, really understanding the leverage points within the system.
It sounds almost like the Fosbury flop in high jump, you
Right.
know?
Good analogy.
Once considered completely outlandish, but then it became the standard because it just fundamentally redefined the approach. And this principle, the book argues, applies universally. If you want uncommon results, well, you've got to take uncommon actions. And for you, this raises a really important question. What common sense rules are you just accepting, maybe in your own life or career, that might actually be limiting your potential? So, okay, you're open to challenging the rules. Where do you even begin? The book lays out its powerful 4-step process, that deal framework, starting with definition. And the first tool here is something the author calls fear setting. Sounds intense.
It does, but it's actually incredibly practical. Fear setting is this methodical exercise where you meticulously define your worst-case scenarios. You actually list out what you're afraid of, then you figure out what you do to recover if those fears actually happen, and then critically, what the actual long-term impact would likely be. The author talks about his own experience being paralyzed by the fear of leaving his company, and how doing this exercise revealed that his imagined, life-ending disasters were often just, well, minor inconveniences, like a 1 or 2 on a 1 to 10 scale.
I found that story about Hans the attorney really compelling too.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
He was terrified of quitting his high-paying job, right? But then he takes this paragliding risk in Rio and realizes, hey, risks aren't actually that scary once you take them. And then he goes off and starts a surf adventure company in Brazil. It's fascinating how just confronting his fears through that process made him more, at peace, even less afraid of things like plane turbulence later on.
Exactly. It's about conquering fear by really defining its scope, by looking it right in the eye. And this connects directly to the idea that unreasonable goals are, maybe paradoxically, easier to achieve.
How so? That seems counterintuitive.
Well, the book argues that setting huge, seemingly impossible goals injects these sort of adrenaline infusions that give you endurance and real focus. Realistic goals, on the other hand, they can often be kind of uninspiring, right? They don't create that same powerful drive.
That actually makes a lot of sense when you put it that way, like the example with the Princeton students.
Right. He challenged them to contact these super high-profile people, George Bush Sr., the Google CEO Eric Schmidt.
Yeah, just get answers to simple questions.
Simple questions. And not a single student actually completed it. Why? They said it was difficult.
Mm.
But the author's point is that, look, the world is often just as insecure as you are, or maybe people just aren't even trying for those big wins. It's often easier to achieve a truly ambitious goal because the competition for those really audacious aims is surprisingly low. Most people just count themselves out before they even start.
Convinced it's impossible.
Exactly. Which leads right into dreamlining.
Okay, dreamlining.
Yeah, this is a very practical exercise. It helps you define what you'd actually do if you suddenly had, say, $100 million in the bank. Or just what would genuinely excite you to wake up for each morning. You list out dreams for like 6 and 12 months ahead. You convert dreams like being rich into doing dreams like traveling to Patagonia.
More actionable.
Much more actionable.
Mhm.
And then you calculate your target monthly income, or TMO, needed to fund those dreams. So for instance, that $260,000 Lamborghini might only cost, $2,897 a month to finance.
Huh.
It often reveals that your wildest dreams are actually far cheaper and way more accessible than you probably imagine.
And a core takeaway here, it seems, is the absolute urgency. Taking that first step now, even if it's tiny. Expert, why is that immediate first step so crucial for turning these dreams into reality, according to the author? Is it mostly psychological or is it practical too?
It's really both, I think. Psychologically, it breaks that inertia, that perfectionism that often stops us from starting anything.
Yeah, waiting for the perfect moment.
Exactly. And practically, it just creates momentum. The book implies that tomorrow becomes never. Because without that initial push, the idea just stays abstract. It never becomes concrete action. It's about overcoming that psychological resistance to change by making it tangible, like right away.
Okay, so you've defined your dreams, you've faced your fears. The next step in deal is elimination. And this is where the book really seems to flip the script on, traditional productivity advice.
It absolutely does.
It's not about doing more, it's about ruthlessly cutting out the meaningless work.
The core concept here is the Pareto principle, right? The old 80-20 rule.
Right, 80% of results from 20% of effort.
Exactly. And applied to business, this meant the author literally fired over 250 low-yield online affiliates to focus only on the two that were generating 90% of his income.
Wow, that takes guts.
It does. But it didn't just save him time. It actually increased his online partner income by over 50%. Less was truly more.
He even applied this 80-20 thinking to customers, which sounds really controversial.
Yeah. He recounts this story of a ball breaker customer, as he calls them. Contributed only 10% of revenue, but caused nearly all his unhappiness, constant demands.
We've all had those, maybe not customers, but situations.
Right. So eventually he just laid it out. Here's how interactions will proceed from now on, or we end the relationship. He lost that one customer, but the others he did this with actually corrected course. And he became, in his words, 10 times happier with his business.
It really highlights that idea that being busy is most often used as a guise for avoiding the few critically important but uncomfortable actions. That hits home.
It really does. And this concept is further reinforced by Parkinson's law.
Oh, yeah, the idea that work just expands to fill the time you give it.
That's the one. If you give yourself a week for a 2-hour task, it will almost without fail take the whole week. So the solution, the book argues, is to artificially shorten your deadlines and limit your tasks only to what is truly important. Be ruthless.
And a huge part of this elimination is adopting what he calls a low-information diet. He admits he almost never watches the news or even checks voicemail when he's abroad. Checks business email maybe only once a week.
His reasoning is pretty simple, really.
Yeah.
Most information is time-consuming, negative, irrelevant to your goals, and outside of your influence. Why consume it?
So cultivate selective ignorance.
That's the phrase he uses. Instead of trying to drink from the fire hose of hundreds of sources, identify maybe just a few reliable people who can synthesize information for you. Or, if you want to learn a new skill, find the single top-rated book on it, and maybe even try contacting the author directly for deeper insights.
Get right to the source.
Exactly. Redirect all that irrelevant, unactionable noise that just clogs up our mental bandwidth.
Which naturally leads to interruption, tackling the constant meetings and phone calls that derail focus.
Yeah, the productivity killers.
He recommends using an email auto-response template stating you only check email, say, twice a day, and urging genuinely urgent matters to be handled by phone.
And for meetings. His advice is basically to tactfully avoid them if they lack clear objectives and agendas. He even quotes the humorist Dave Barry, who colorfully described meetings as an addictive, highly self-indulgent activity, really emphasizing how often they're unproductive.
Ouch. But probably true a lot of the time.
Probably.
Mm.
And a key strategy to manage unavoidable tasks is batching.
Grouping similar things together.
Exactly, like checking all your physical mail at once or paying all your bills in one session. Do them less frequently, but more efficiently. He mentions he once checked physical mail no more than once a week for 3 years. Saved hundreds of hours, he estimates, with minimal downside. It highlights the power of focused bursts.
Okay, so we've defined, we've eliminated. Next up in deal is automation. This is where you create systems that work for you, letting you be, as the book puts it, the ghost in the machine.
That's a great phrase for it. And the book illustrates this really well with the concept of outsourcing life. There's the story of A.J. Jacobs, an editor at Esquire magazine.
Right. He hired a remote assistant in India.
Yeah, a remote executive assistant in Bangalore named Honey Balani for all sorts of simple tasks. He even, sort of jokingly, had her try to outsource his therapy and delegate his worry.
Didn't she even send his wife an e-card apologizing for him forgetting her birthday?
She did. It's a funny example, but the core idea is serious. Train yourself to be the boss, to effectively delegate and manage, rather than trying to do everything yourself.
Okay, be the manager, not the doer.
Exactly. Which leads directly to the concept of finding a muse, which is basically business designed specifically for automated cash flow with minimal ongoing time investment from you.
Like a passive income machine.
Pretty much.
Mhm.
A prime example given is a guy named Doug, who created ProSoundEffects.com. Now, Doug doesn't own the physical sound effect libraries, nor does he handle customer service directly. Customers buy the sound libraries online, a PDF guide is automatically emailed to them, and a separate fulfillment house ships the actual product.
So he's removed himself from the day-to-day operation.
Completely. He apparently works less than 2 hours a week on it
Yeah.
and pulls in over $10,000 a month.
Wow. Okay, so the goal isn't really to run a business in the traditional sense.
No, it's to own one that effectively runs itself.
How do you find something like that?
Well, the book suggests picking a niche market, maybe something underserved. It gives that humorous example of lavish dwarf entertainment just to make a point about specificity.
Right.
Then, create a product, ideally information-based or easily outsourced, that can be manufactured or set up quickly, maybe 3 to 4 weeks, for under $500. And crucially, sell it at a higher price point, say $5,200. The idea is that higher prices often attract lower maintenance, more serious customers.
Interesting counterintuitive point there.
It is. And before you manufacture anything or invest heavily, the book strongly advocates for micro-testing the product idea, using tools like Google AdWords.
How does that work?
You create simple one-page websites and run cheap online ads targeting your niche. You're essentially testing customer response and proving there's actual demand before you commit significant resources.
Smart. De-risking the whole venture.
Exactly. It
Got it.
minimizes financial risk significantly. You only build what people have already shown they want to buy.
And then there's this surprising nugget about guarantees. The lose-win guarantee.
Yeah, that one's pretty radical. Instead of just a standard money-back guarantee, you structure it so it's actually profitable for the customer, even if the product fails for them.
How?
Well, the author's own company, Body Key, apparently offered to send customers a check for 10% more than the purchase price if the product didn't work as promised.
Seriously. Wouldn't everyone just claim it didn't work?
You'd think so, but he claims returns were still less than 3%, and sales absolutely soared. The psychology is powerful.
So the idea is lose-win is the new win-win. Build so much confidence and remove all risk that people buy.
That seems to be the logic. Make the offer irresistible.
Okay, wow. Define, eliminate, automate. Finally, we arrive at liberation. Step 4. This seems to be the art of truly embracing that mobile lifestyle and achieving real personal freedom. And often it involves killing your job or at least transforming it dramatically.
Right. And the book tackles the psychological barriers head-on, arguing that pride is stupid when it comes to staying stuck in unfulfilling jobs. A lot of people stay just out of embarrassment or this fear that quitting is somehow permanent, or it'll ruin their resume forever, or lead to instant financial ruin.
Yeah, those are common fears.
Very common. But the author counters that it's often easier than you think to get fired or quit and find new opportunities and rising gaps. Those can be framed creatively. It's just creative nonfiction sometimes.
Huh, I like that. It talks about the Japanese salaryman concept too, right?
Yes, the Sarari man, that traditional 9-to-5 life. And the goal is Datsusara Suru, escaping that lifestyle. The book provides a very practical step-by-step guide for employees who want to negotiate remote work agreements with their current employers.
How does it suggest doing that?
It involves several steps. First, increasing your measurable value or investment in the company before you ask. Then, meticulously proving you can achieve increased output while working off-site. Then propose a trial period for remote work, maybe just 1 or 2 days a week initially. And use what he calls the hourglass approach. Gradually reducing your in-office presence over time, like slowly decreasing your days in the office while demonstrating continued or even improved productivity.
A phased approach. Makes sense. Less threatening to the company.
Exactly. And for you, the listener, perhaps the most intriguing part of liberation is the concept of mini-retirements.
Instead of one big retirement at the end.
Right. These are recurring breaks spread throughout your life throughout the year. Sometimes it means extended overseas travel. Other times it might just be exploring something new across town. But the key is they're always designed to take you to a different world psychologically. It's about injecting these periods of deep immersion, learning, and recovery throughout your working life, not just waiting till the end.
And financially, it argues this is more feasible than people think.
Definitely. The book emphasizes that living luxuriously in many parts of the world can be incredibly cheap compared to, say, major U.S. or European cities. The author shares his own actual monthly expenses, things like a penthouse apartment on the equivalent of New York's Fifth Avenue in Buenos Aires for only $550 a month, or a huge apartment in Berlin for $300 a month.
That's incredibly cheap.
It really puts things in perspective. You can potentially live like a rock star, as he puts it, for less than you might expect if you choose the right locations.
What about people with families with kids? Does the book address that?
It does. What's crucial here is the idea that children don't automatically have to hold you back from this kind of lifestyle. It shares stories of families traveling the world with their kids, arguing that children often learn valuable things like patience, adaptability, and even a greater love for reading when exposed to new environments and cultures.
So it challenges the perception of danger or difficulty.
Exactly. It suggests it's often our perception of danger or inconvenience, not the actual reality, that stops people from pursuing these things.
But okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. What happens after you achieve this freedom? You've automated, you're liberated. Then what? The book thoughtfully addresses this potential pitfall, the existential vacuum.
Go void.
Too much idle time, once you've subtracted all the bad stuff like a hated job, can apparently lead to self-doubt, boredom, even a lack of purpose.
This is such a critical point. The ultimate goal isn't just to eliminate work or escape the grind. It's actually to live more and, importantly, become more.
So, filling the void productively.
Intentionally, yes.
Yeah.
Filling it with high-value activities. That could mean acquiring new skills. The author himself learned, 6 languages after failing Spanish in high school?
Yeah, that's impressive.
Or engaging in what he calls service for the right reasons. Finding meaningful ways to contribute beyond just yourself now that you have the time and resources.
And for those who inevitably hit butts in the road while trying all this,
The book anticipates that too. It outlines the top 13 new rich mistakes. These range from things like micromanaging your outsourced tasks, defeating the purpose of automation, to getting stuck viewing just one product or one job as the be-all and end-all, forgetting to keep evolving.
this is an ongoing process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The overarching takeaway seems to be, life is simply too short to be small, to play it safe, to not pursue what truly excites you.
Wow. Okay. What a deep dive into the 4-hour work week. We've really explored a lot, from defining your deepest fears and wildest dreams to automating your income, eliminating the fluff, and actually living out those dreams through things like mini retirements. The central message, it seems, coming up time and again, is that the rules you live by, they're often just self-imposed conventions. They can be challenged, they can be redefined.
Yeah, this whole discussion really encourages, I think, critical thinking about how we allocate our most precious resources, our time and our attention, and how we can consciously design our lives, rather than just defaulting to the traditional paths everyone else follows. It's about recognizing that having options is real power, and that achieving the kind of life you might believe only millionaires can afford is often far more accessible than you think.
So for you listening, here's maybe a final provocative thought to chew on, inspired by the book. If you genuinely believed, as the book suggests, that the timing is never right for any of the truly important things in life, what one unreasonable thing, what one big, maybe scary goal would you resolve to start today, right now, knowing that, as the author says, tomorrow becomes never? Because maybe, if you're not making mistakes, as he suggests, you might not be working on hard enough problems or aiming high enough. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep designing the life you truly want to live.